Hearing to order. The committee meets this morning to consider the nominations of Mr. Franklin Parker to be the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, Dr. Agnes Schaefer to be the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, Dr. Ravi Chaudhary to be the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Energy, Installations, and the Environment, and Mr. Frank Calvelli to be Assistant Secretary of the Air Force. I thank the nominees for their long careers of service to the United States and their willingness to assume these important roles. I would also like to welcome the family members who are with us today. Mr. Parker, I welcome your wife, Anne, son, Franklin, and daughter, Diana. Dr. Schaefer, I welcome your husband, David. Dr. Chaudhary, I welcome your wife, Uma, and daughter, Nina. And Mr. Calvelli, I welcome your wife, Melissa. Mr. Parker, you are nominated to be Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. If confirmed, you would be the principal advisor to the Secretary of the Navy with overall supervision of a number of areas, including military and civilian personnel policy, military readiness, quality of life and health care programs, and the Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program Office. You are well qualified, having held this position previously during the Obama administration, in addition to your long career as a legal counsel both in and out of government. Our naval forces are maintaining an extremely high operations tempo across all areas. As such, the issues of readiness and retention are increasingly important challenges for the Department. And fostering respect within the ranks, including supporting diversity and inclusion, eradicating extremism, and addressing sexual assault and harassment must be a priority. During your testimony, I would ask you to share your goals with us with respect to each of these issues. Dr. Parker, you are nominated to be Assistant Secretary of the Army for, Dr. Parker, you are nominated to be Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. You bring a considerable academic background to this position, including your leadership on dozens of RAND studies assessing various military personnel policies and programs. I would like to know what lessons you plan to bring from those experiences to this position. If confirmed, you will serve as the principal advisor to the Secretary of the Army with overall supervision of America's military and civilian manpower policy, reserve component affairs, human resources, force structure policy, and other critical matters as part of the Army senior leadership. I hope you will discuss the challenges you see for this position and your plans for meeting them. Dr. Chaudhary, you are nominated to be Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Energy, Installations, and the Environment. Your decades of experience across the Department of Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, and as an Air Force pilot should serve you well in these roles. Climate change and extreme weather have already cost DoD billions of dollars in installation damages and will increasingly impact readiness and posture. Just like any other threat, the Air Force must better prepare for the impacts of environmental degradation. The Air Force is by far the largest consumer of fuel and energy for the Defense Department, and you will be responsible for making progress in its efficiency and resilience. Similarly, contamination from PFAS chemicals remains a serious issue on Air Force installations. I would like to know your plans for addressing these challenges. Finally, Mr. Calvelli, you are nominated to be Assistant Secretary of the Air Force. With oversight of space acquisition, you are the first person to be nominated for this position since the Space Force was authorized in the 2020 NDAA. Your long career in the National Reconnaissance Office will lend valuable perspective to this role. The breadth and scope of the Defense Department's acquisition laws, regulations, and directives is expansive. The FY22 NDAA improved the ability of your position to oversee not only the acquisition efforts of the Space Force, but to ensure that space acquisition efforts are integrated across the services. I'm interested in hearing your views on how to improve the Department's acquisition culture and how you will implement the directions of this year's NDAA. Thank you again to our nominees. I look forward to your testimonies. Now let me recognize the Ranking Member, Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks to our witnesses for being here today. Our nation's top military and intelligence leaders have told us that we're in the most dangerous position that we've been in as a country, and maybe forever. I know that the 2018 National Defense Strategy, which is the copy of it right here, provides a roadmap, and we've been using this roadmap since 18 to deal with the security challenges, and it's going to continue to be our priority. We have quite a few challenges in the areas that you folks would be overseeing. Dr. Chaudhary, you've been nominated to oversee the Air Force's infrastructure. Your commentary over the last several years has focused on extremism in the military. I don't disagree that we don't want any extremism in our military. When we find them, we're going to have to act swiftly to remove them from our ranks. But at the same time, this isn't a systemic problem. The Countering Extremist Activity Working Group recently found that fewer than 100 service members engage in extremist behavior over the past year. So when our leaders talk, or the people nominated to serve as leaders, like yourselves, call service members extremists, and the vast majority of them aren't, I get worried about the message that you're sending to the people who would be there to lead. So I would like to discuss this more with you today. Mr. Calvelli, you have been nominated to be the first Space Service Acquisition Executive. Congress created this job over 2 years ago, and as I've reviewed those individuals who will be involved in it, you certainly have the credentials that very few other people have. Now, we know that China and Russia are also making space a priority, so I'm interested to hear what you'll do to make sure that our Guardians and the Joint Force have the tools that they need to defend our interests in space. Dr. Schaefer and Mr. Parker, you would be responsible for the readiness and well-being of our military personnel in the Army and Navy. Nothing's more important, and I look forward to hearing your comments on how you plan to attack these problems. Look forward to hearing from you, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Inhofe. Dr. Schaefer, I apologize. I think in my introduction I confused you with Mr. Parker. We are trying to encourage cooperation between the Army and Navy, but not to that extent. So, Dr. Schaefer, you are going to be nominated for Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, and I look forward to your questions. At this point, let me recognize Mr. Parker for your statement, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Reed. Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to join you here today. I am honored by this opportunity to appear before you regarding my nomination for the position of Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. I wish to thank President Biden, Secretary Austin, and Secretary Del Toro for the confidence they have placed in me. In addition, I wish to thank my wife, Anne, my son, Franklin, and my daughter, Diana, for their enduring and unwavering support. There is no greater calling than service to others. Service for the benefit of another, service without promise of reward, service for something greater than each of us, but for all of us. For me, this lesson was taught not solely by words, but by example. The example of my father, Franklin Parker, a former Air Force munitions officer who volunteered to serve his nation in Vietnam at the height of conflict. The example of my uncle Glenn Parker and cousin Frank Harris, also Vietnam veterans who each served distinguished careers in the Army and Air Force respectively. In addition, I learned the value of service from the example of my grandfather, Fred Curls, who not only served in the National Guard, but dedicated his life afterwards to service in the civil rights movement and to inspiring others to achieve what they believe. No one exemplifies this notion of service more completely than our women and men in uniform and our civilian personnel who complement and support them. Through their courage, dedication, and skill, they comprise the world's greatest fighting force. Through their commitment and sacrifice, they help guarantee the freedoms we enjoy and the way of life we cherish. Through their character, they present America's best foot forward to the world. Indeed, our military is defined by our people, a mosaic of America representing our diversity, our differences, and our greatest strengths. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, it is a privilege to be considered for this opportunity to serve our sailors, Marines, and our Department of the Navy civilian workforce. I believe my experience in multiple roles within the Department of the Navy, as a senior leader at a civilian agency, and as a private sector attorney provide me with well-rounded perspective that, if confirmed, I will use to my greatest ability to support those who so readily and ably serve our nation. Our people are our most valuable asset, our greatest strength, and our most profound capability, both as a military and as a nation. As such, our service members and the civilian personnel supporting them deserve our firmest commitment to ensuring they have the tools, policy, and support they require, not only to succeed in the mission, but to thrive in life. If confirmed, I will do my utmost to further our military readiness, combat abuses within our ranks, support our military and civilian families, reduce barriers to mental health support, and to foster a diverse and inclusive environment that prioritizes respect for all its members. Further, if confirmed, I commit to working with Congress and the members of this committee to do so. Thank you sincerely for your consideration of my nomination. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Dr. Schaefer, please.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished committee members. I'm deeply honored to come before you today as President Biden's nominee for Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. I'm grateful for your consideration of my nomination and for your long-standing and bipartisan commitment to our national security. I would like to thank President Biden, Secretary Austin, and Secretary Wormuth for the confidence and trust they have placed in me through this nomination. I also want to thank my husband, who's here with me today, for his enduring love and support across the seasons of our amazing life together. Unfortunately, my mom and 3 siblings could not attend today, but they're watching me from various places across the country, and they know how much I love them for their part in shaping who I am. I sit before you today as an example of the realization of the American dream. In 1956, as a young couple, my parents fled to Austria from Hungary when the Soviet Union invaded their homeland and quashed the Hungarian Revolution against communism. They were eventually granted asylum by the United States, something for which my parents, siblings, and I are forever grateful. This gratitude has deeply ingrained the importance of service in my family. My father, an oceanographer by training, dedicated his life's work to U.S. national security by using his expertise to better detect Soviet submarines so that we could eventually win the Cold War. One of my brothers and my nephew have served in the Air Force, and my sister has spent more than 30 years working in the defense industry. I deeply honor the risks taken and sacrifices made by my brother, nephew, and other service members, civilians and contractors who bravely serve our nation. Watching my family, friends, and colleagues navigate the challenges and opportunities posed by a life of service with a steadfast commitment to our shared mission has inspired me to work to find solutions to those challenges, expand opportunities, and strengthen our national security. That inspiration has guided me on my path as a national security researcher. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, and upon finishing college in Miami, I completed my PhD at Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, and then a fellowship at Princeton University before being hired by the RAND Corporation. Over the last 16 years as a researcher at RAND, my focus every day has been to improve the lives of our active and service member component, our active and reserve component member families, and improve our military's readiness to meet the objectives of our national security strategy. If confirmed, these will continue to be my priorities in service of our soldiers, civilians, contractors, and their families. I can think of no better way to continue working on these issues than by helping the Army succeed in the face of varied, complex challenges. As our nation confronts myriad national security threats, we must maintain current and future readiness by putting people first. We must look for creative ways to ensure that our military and civilian workforce have the education, training, and skills necessary to meet both current and future threats. Additionally, we need to ensure that our military and civilian workforce have safe and healthy work environments. free from harmful behaviors such as sexual assault and harassment, domestic abuse, and suicide. Finally, we owe it to our workforce and their families to help them enjoy the highest quality of life possible. Members of the committee, if confirmed, I look forward to working closely with you to address the needs of the Army's total force, including its active and reserve component, military and civilian workforce, as well as their families, to ensure the readiness of our Army to meet not only today's national security challenges, but tomorrow as well. I look forward to your questions, and thank you again for the opportunity to be with you here today.
Thank you, Dr. Schaefer. Dr. Chaudhary, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and members of the committee. It's a privilege to join you today in consideration for the role of Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Energy, Installations, and the Environment. I'm humbled by the confidence President Biden, Secretary Austin, and Secretary Kendall have placed in me, and I extend my heartfelt gratitude to them. I would also like to acknowledge my family today for their love and support, starting with my parents, who are watching from my hometown in Minnesota, my brother and former state senator, Ravi Chaudhary, and my sister, Dr. Bala Chaudhary, a professor at Dartmouth University. Like many immigrant families, my parents came to this country over 50 years ago in pursuit of the American dream and share a remarkable story of patriotism. I'm grateful to my son, Christian, who's watching from Penn State, and my daughter, Nina, a high school senior and aspiring aerospace engineer who is with us today. Both of you have lived your lives on Air Force installations and know that the challenges military children face. To see a headline on TV followed by endless uncertainty and waiting, and watching your dad go out that door and hear the jets roar. I love you both. Of course, I cannot thank my lovely wife and eternal anchor, Uma, enough. Alongside me over decades of service, she shares a deep understanding of life on Air Force installations, as well as the sacrifices military families make when they serve, especially during times of war. I'm humbled to have the opportunity to continue a career of service, one that began 30 years ago at the Air Force Academy. I spent a little over 2 decades on active duty, where I led a variety of critical mission sets as an Air Force pilot and aerospace engineer. From launching the first GPS constellation to leading critical flight tests and combat operations, these missions afforded me the opportunity to work at many different installations and understand their needs. I've had the honor of serving in operational flying wings, training bases, test ranges, space and logistics centers, and of course flying into and out of overseas and forward locations. As a result of these experiences, I gained a deep understanding of the vital role installations play in the readiness of our joint force. My service also brought me to the Pentagon, where I worked on high-level strategy, force posture, budget, and transformation of the total force. Later, I had the privilege of serving as a senior executive at the Federal Aviation Administration, where I was responsible for leading a team of regional administrators and a federal workforce of over 1,000 employees. Among my diverse responsibilities, I oversaw the transformation of major federal facilities and airports, including projects that reduce carbon footprint and increase environmental stewardship, and brought innovation to our nation's space program. My duties required interagency collaboration with DoD, EPA, Department of Interior, as well as state, local, and tribal governments on complex issues ranging from navigation and spaceports to protection of our natural resources. If confirmed, these executive experiences will arm me with the skills to be successful in the Department of the Air Force. Air and Space Forces deliver combat power from their installations. Consequently, the resiliency of our bases, especially at forward locations, is of utmost importance to military readiness and execution of the National Defense Strategy. Furthermore, technological advances also mean that we can no longer assume installations are a sanctuary from threats across all domains. Ensuring a resilient, hardened, and dispersed network of installations creates ambiguity for potential adversaries, complicates targeting, and presents operational dilemmas for those who threaten U.S. national interests. Additionally, extreme weather events and other climate-related effects adversely impacting installation readiness. Furthermore, the speed, range, and flexibility of air and space power is dependent upon the amount of energy it can supply and sustain. Therefore, the more efficiently the Air Force manages its operational energy, the more effective it will be in delivering effects for combatant commanders. In closing, perhaps the greatest qualification I have occurred a little over 30 years ago when I walked up the ramp on my first day at the Air Force Academy. My story is an airman's story. It's a guardian's story. On the 75th anniversary year of the department, you have my pledge that, if confirmed, I will work hard for every day for the airmen, guardians, and their families who serve. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Mr. Calvelli, please.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee, and thank you for recognizing the importance of space acquisition by creating this new position. If confirmed, I would be honored to serve as the first Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Space Acquisition and Integration. Thank you to President Biden and Secretary Austin for supporting my nomination, and thank you to Secretary Kendall and Undersecretary Jones for having confidence in my abilities. I'm excited about this opportunity, and if confirmed, will drive the direction of the acquisition for the Space Force. Having served 30 years at the National Reconnaissance Office, 8 years as its Principal Deputy Director and Deputy Acquisition Executive, if confirmed, I will bring my leadership running large organizations and leadership driving successful space acquisitions to the department and to this new critical position. As you know, we are at a critical juncture for our defense space architecture, and there is a real sense of urgency to act. The nation needs to outpace its adversaries and maintain the technological advantage we get from space. The nation needs to integrate its space architecture with other warfighting domains to give its warfighters an advantage. The nation needs to make its space architecture more resilient so that it can be counted on during times of crisis and conflict, and the nation needs to do this with speed. If confirmed, I will look to drive speed into the department's space acquisitions in order to get new capabilities into the hands of the warfighters faster. From my experience and my expertise in space acquisition, speed can be added into acquisitions by ensuring requirements and analysis are coordinated and completed well ahead of capability need, by driving early technology risk reduction and research and development of new capabilities to reduce risk when we get to the acquisition phase, by utilizing the right acquisition strategies, the right contract types, and the right contract incentives that incentivize speed as well as successful contract execution, driving cost and schedule realism into proposals that we receive from industry, acquiring smaller systems for space, driving our ground systems to be more open architectures while developing ground software in smaller, more manageable pieces, and making sure that space and ground come together as a system with ground ready before launch so we can take advantage of what we just launched. In addition, speed and acquisitions can be helped by using existing technology in some cases, limiting contract changes and keeping requirements stable, empowering our program managers and holding them accountable for program success, holding industry accountable for results, driving an organizational focus on meeting schedule, cost, and technical performance commitments across the organization, and creating a culture of successful program execution while driving a sense of urgency. Based upon my experience with these approaches, speed can be added back to our space acquisitions and capability can be delivered to the warfighters quicker. If confirmed, I will also continue to drive towards a more resilient space architecture. Being out of government for the last year, I will quickly if confirmed, I will quickly catch up on today's progress and on current threat assessments. From my experience, resiliency to space can be added by taking advantage of diverse orbits, adding new technical capabilities, using a mix of traditional satellites and smaller, more proliferated satellites, robust space situational awareness, the ability for rapid reconstitution, and taking advantage and integrating commercial capabilities. Resiliency also includes making sure that our ground systems don't have single-point failures and that they are secure from cyber attacks. Nothing is more important than making sure our space capabilities are available and can be counted on to support the warfighter and the nation during times of crisis and conflict. If confirmed, adding resiliency will be another top priority. In addition, if confirmed, I will also work in a collaborative manner across the department, across the services, and with the intelligence community to ensure the integration of space with other warfighting domains and to avoid duplication of efforts. Finally, I'd like to thank my family, my wife, Melissa, who is a proud member of the federal government, working currently at the National Reconnaissance Office. Both Melissa and I believe in the importance of public service, and even though I've only been out of government for a little bit over a year, I definitely missed it. Thank you to my children, Michael, Sydney, and Samantha, and my stepdaughter, Ashley, for all their support. And thank you again to this committee for creating this new critical position and for inviting me to this hearing. If confirmed, I commit to being fully transparent with this committee on progress, issues, and status of space acquisition. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Calvelli. I have a series of questions that are required for all civilian nominees. You may answer in unison. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes.
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 Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
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 Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that this committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the productions of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes.
Yes.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for any of their testimony or briefings?
Yes.
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 Thank you very much. I'm going to address the same question to both Mr. Parker and Dr. Schaefer, since your services are different, but your roles are quite similar. There is a significant issue in recruiting in multiple aspects. First, as we all recognize, the pool of qualified young people to recruit continues to decrease. Second, the focus, the force is not as geographically diversified as possible. And there is a growing statistical phenomenon of sort of sons and daughters of service members joining and joining and joining, so that the number of service members who are children or grandchildren increases, which, again, threatens diversity. Starting with Mr. Parker, how would you propose to respond?
Senator, expanding the base of recruits to our military is fundamentally important. Our nation has incredible potential and untapped potential, and so taking advantage of the largest swath of that is critical to maintaining the strength of the force. I agree with the observations that you made. I think one of the main ways that we could try to go about doing that is by expanding that geographic diversity, trying to make sure that the services are able to tap into populations that right now currently aren't the primary populations where recruiting is taking place. So really trying to draw on the geographic breadth of the nation in terms of tapping into that talent. Separately, as you noted, Senator, so many individuals like myself have backgrounds where there's been family service, but really reaching out to people who don't necessarily have that type of family contact, that family history, that type of personal familiarity with the service is fundamentally important. I think both for raising the profile of the service, but also in increasing the base of eligible people to serve.
Thank you. Dr. Schaefer, please.
Thank you, Senator. I'm extremely concerned about the recruiting environment right now. We're all competing for the same talent, and that competition is fierce right now. The geographic aspect as well really concerns me. I think that this is, in the case of the Army, a time for a reset in the way that we think about recruiting. Traditionally, we have recruited in that sunshine smile across the southern part of the United States. And I'm concerned that we need to move out into other areas where we haven't traditionally had participation in the Army. But most concerning to me, I think, is the decrease in propensity that we're seeing. And I think that we need to find out why that is decreasing. And I think that we need to make the Army more relatable to the American public, and push out to those areas such as the Northeast and the Midwest, where we're not seeing the numbers of recruits that we would like to see. And I think that that's partly because we don't have many installations in those areas, and people don't see folks in Army uniforms walking down the street, or they don't know anybody in the Army. And we need to change that. So I absolutely share your concerns about this.
Thank you very much. Dr. Chaudhary, as I indicated, and as you well know, the Air Force consumes the most hydrocarbons in the Department of Defense, and that implicates climate changes, but also in terms of military operations. We lost more people trying to get gasoline out to the troops in Iraq and Afghanistan than in many other circumstances. So it's a definite operational factor. How can the Air Force modify the acquisition process while investing in operational energy improvements? Could you respond quickly? And my time is diminishing, so.
Yes, Senator, thank you for the question. It is absolutely critical that the Air Force address operational energy as the largest consumer. I believe that if the operational energy concerns are addressed, we can be more flexible with executing operations. And with the acquisition system, I believe early involvement is absolutely critical to understanding how we can affect change and ensuring that the operational energy is addressed very early in the acquisition process and continues.
Thank you very much. Mr. Calvelli, you are the first person that is going to take this position, so you're the path breaker, pathfinder. And it just strikes me that there is enough issues within the Air Force getting satellites in space and other aspects, but you will have the additional challenge of going to other services and saying, you've got to be able to talk to me and I've got to be able to talk to you in a colloquial sense. Any thoughts on that challenge?
Yes, thank you, Senator. That's going to be a really important part in terms of collaborating across the board with everyone, all the services. And I think this committee has given me an amazing tool called the Acquisition Space Council, or the Space Acquisition Council, I forget the exact name, I'm sorry. And I think I could use that tool to my advantage to bring in discuss space architecture, discuss space acquisition strategies, and discuss across the services where we need to go with the space architecture. So I think this committee has given me an important tool to take advantage of and use.
Thank you very much. Senator Inhofe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Chaudhary, I believe, I could be wrong, and correct me if I am wrong, that you are the one who was advocating using artificial intelligence on our military personnel to identify toxic communications. Is that correct? Where are you?
Senator, that is correct.
Okay, well, I think it's a really horrible idea. Tell me why it's a good idea.
Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to address that article. The intent of the article was to engage in a public discussion on addressing extremism, as well as other areas affecting readiness. The article fell short of that, and I regret that. But let me state clearly my feelings on...
But let me do this, because
Yes,
I do want to get two other questions, two other witnesses, and I want to come back to this, so you be thinking of a good answer. Dr. Schaefer, we're starting to see signs that the Army may have to reduce the end strength in order to comply with the administration's budget cuts. You know, I'm a very old Army guy, and it seems since I've been here in both the House and the Senate that the Army is always the first ones that get cut, so I have a little bias in this. The last time this happened, it was during the Obama administration. The Army cut an average of 20,000 soldiers a year over 5 years, and the Army is basically the same size as it was before the September 11th. But the threats from Russia and North Korea and others have only grown, so we can't afford this mistake twice. And based on your experience, what are the risks associated with a rapid reduction in Army end strength at this time?
Senator, thank you for this question. This also concerns me. I think that what we're seeing in Ukraine illustrates the fact that we live in an extremely uncertain world, and the Army is being asked to address a variety of threats. And in order to be able to carry out those multi-domain operations associated with our modernization plans, we need to maintain end strength. And I think decreasing end strength is...
So you would support maintaining end strength at least where we are today?
That's correct.
Okay.
And I would, given the new NDS that's coming out, I think we will need to appropriately calibrate that end strength to these future threats.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Mr. Parker, since you last served in the Navy, there have been several preventable major ship collisions, groundings, fires, and other incidents. And Navy investigations attribute the accidents mostly to personnel-related causes such as, inadequate manpower or training. The chief of the Navy personnel recently testified that the Navy is 5,000 to 6,000 sailors short of manning our ships today. Now, you have a background, you're going to be responsible for some of these things, problems that we're faced with right now. What is your assessment of the role of the manning and training played in these accidents? You know the accidents I'm referring to, and you know that that we have observed that we need, that we are short. So what's your response to that, and how are you going to handle that?
Senator, I absolutely share your concern with some of the recent incidents that have occurred within the Navy. I believe many of those, similar to what the Chief of Naval Personnel said, are attributable to manning issues and other challenges within the force. I understand that the department is working hard to address that. I understand that since the McCain and Fitzgerald collisions, the Navy has assessed 23,000 new sailors and has moved 10,000 new to the fleet since that time. If confirmed, really focusing on those types of manning issues and related cultural issues. I know there are initiatives such as Get Real, Get Better, which is really focused on assessing where the Navy has fallen short and then taking lessons learned from that. I think those types of initiatives are helpful both in terms of the manning piece, but also in terms of operational ensuring that we learn from our mistakes. And if confirmed, I will support those fully.
Very good. Now, Dr. Chaudhary, I'd like to have you go ahead and finish answering the question that I started out with.
Thank you, Senator. To continue and to provide clarity, the men and women who serve, the vast majority of the men and women who serve with honor, integrity, and excellence. And I believe that the constitutional rights of our men and women who serve should be protected, period. If confirmed, I will work with Secretary Kendall and follow his lead on addressing extremism in the military.
Okay, well, except you've already addressed it. You've already talked about it, and I've already expressed my feelings about that issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Rono, please.
I ask all nominees on any of the committees on which I sit the following two initial questions, and you can respond in unison. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
No.
For Dr. Chaudhary, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility on Oahu. It is a massive underground fuel storage facility located 100 feet over Oahu's aquifer, which is the main supplier of water for residents on Oahu. This facility holds 250 million gallons of fuel to support military operations across the Indo-Pacific. The storage facility has contaminated the Navy's water system, displacing almost 4,000 families since December and impacting, I would say, over 100,000 residents and putting our aquifer at risk. As a result, the state of Hawaii ordered the Navy to defuel the tanks, and I plan to hold the Navy accountable to do so. Defueling must be done safely and will require additional funding beyond what is currently being provided. The state of Hawaii, through the Hawaii Department of Health, has the authority to shut down Red Hill through its permitting process. I want to be very clear that I will fully support the Hawaii Department of Health's final permit decision, which at this point, with all of the evidence and information as to how Red Hill was being operated, which will likely shut down Red Hill by denying the Navy a permit to continue operating the facility. As the Navy complies with the defueling order, DOD must come up with alternative solutions to meet our strategic fuel reserve needs in the region. Though the facility is operated by the Navy, a majority of the fuel reserves stored in the facility are for Air Force operations, which means meeting our strategic fuel needs in the region will require collaboration and a department-wide effort. If confirmed, how will you aid in determining a long-term solution to Air Force fuel needs in the Indo-Pacific area?
Thank you, Senator.
Dr. Chaudhary?
First of all, as a former military member, my heart goes out to the families who have gone through this issue and are meeting the challenges of the Red Hill petroleum spill. When I think of them, I think of my family when we served and the need to ensure that we address the needs of the families and the fact that all of our military families deserve a safe, a water supply, and a safe environment to execute the mission and live in their communities. And that includes the surrounding communities around them. So if confirmed, that's my #1 priority in that issue. And resolving that, I understand a review is in process to address this issue, and I look forward to working with the committee to continue to address the issue going forward.
Yes, it's pretty clear to me that the Air Force, considering that they use some 40 to 70% of the fuel out of Red Hill, that they need to be part of the collaborative process to determine how the Air Force's fueling needs will be met if Red Hill is closed. So I'm hopeful that that's where we're heading. For Mr. Parker and Dr. Schaefer, Secretary Austin said today that the U.S. government is not seeing any kind of withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine's border, but instead continues to see Russia add to its capabilities and troops even in the last couple of days. It seems the previous indications that Russia was withdrawing troops was not accurate. As the Department of Defense pivots toward great power competition and is confronted with very real threats of conflict, how will you recruit and retain the best people with relevant skills for future conflicts? This is for both Mr. Park and Dr. Schaefer.
Senator, I agree. Recruitment and retention is fundamentally important, especially with regard to critical skill sets and at this perilous time that we find ourselves in right now. I think part of the challenge specifically for critical skill sets is the intense competition with industry right now. Yeah. And so I believe we have to focus both on the accession side and the retentions piece. On the accession side, leveraging all available authorities to bring people in as easily as possible. On the retention side, really taking care of people and trying to put policies and practices in place to make the military an attractive place for them to make careers instead of moving to other opportunities.
As we go forward, should you be confirmed, which I believe you will be, that we're going to need to really get down to how you are, in fact, going to be able to recruit and retain, because that has been quite a perennial problem over the last number of years that I've served on this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have some other questions that I will submit for the record.
Thank you very much, Senator Rono. Senator Tuberville, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank everybody being here today and your willingness to serve. Mr. Parker, you held this role in 2016 and 17. What unfinished business do you hope to accomplish, this time around?
Thank you, Senator. This time around, I think the main priorities of focus for me will be readiness, retention, and respect, really, for our force. In my last opportunity to serve, it was a tremendous honor to have that opportunity to really support our men and women of the Navy, Marine Corps, our civilian personnel, and our reservists. And so to have this opportunity again, it would just be a tremendous honor to continue to be there for them in that way. But I would really focus on those three areas: readiness, retention, and respect. Making sure that we maintain readiness is fundamental to everything that the force is required to do. The retention piece is required to make sure that not only do we bring in the people we need, but that we're able to keep them in the force so that they can continue to keep us the strongest force in the world. And then the respect piece, just making sure that all our members treat each other respectfully.
Thank you. Dr. Schaefer, we had a long discussion yesterday about recruiting. In your role, you're going to oversee this. It's going to be a tough chore. It has been my observation as a recruiter that some of the Army's recruitment campaigns have been ideologically driven and rather than data driven. And in this day and time, we need an Army. We need somebody that's going to fight. We need somebody that's going to love this country and fight for this country. I'd hope you'd pledge to take that data-based approach and look at it the way of give everybody that opportunity and give them the chance to do their best, because again, as we talked, we have a very small percentage of kids now, or kids or young men or young women that are really eligible to be in the military. So give your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, Senator, thank you for your time yesterday. I really enjoyed our conversation. Recruiting, as I've mentioned previously, I'm extremely concerned about the environment right now. And I think that we do need a reset on the Army's recruiting efforts to think more broadly and to be able to recruit a wider diversity of people. And I mean diversity in a very holistic sense in terms of not only representation, but geographical diversity, diversity across a wide range of backgrounds, skill sets. And I will absolutely take a data-driven approach. It is in my DNA to do that. And so I will naturally lean towards that. And Secretary Wormuth released her objectives recently, and one of them was to make the Army more data-driven, and I will absolutely do what I can to help her in that effort.
Thank you. Mr. Calvelli, last year the Air Force awarded the National Security Space Launch Program, Phase 2, contracts to the United Launch Alliance and SpaceX. How many Phase 2 launches do you think we need to see in order to assess what capabilities will be needed in Phase 3?
Wow, thank you, Senator, for that question. It's a great question. I don't remember the official number of launches that are under contract from the Space Force to both ULA and to SpaceX. But I know it's over several years, and so we're going to see lots of launches of Falcons as well as the future Vulcan system, both very exciting systems to work with. And I think since Phase 3 is a few years out, I think we'll have enough launches under our belt to understand what we really need to do for Phase 3.
Yeah, I think that we're just now finishing up Phase 1, and we're in 1A. We're adding and getting ready to start Phase 2, and that will end up sometimes 2025. And we're going to need to start and look at the responsibilities and the regulations for Phase 3 coming up, and hopefully that's in the future. Dr. Chaudhary, the Chinese, as you said earlier, are tracking us in AI, and you gave a good answer. We would hope that we would stay away from that, as Senator Inhofe was saying. Since he asked my question, I want to ask you about our tanker situation in our Air Force. I flew on one not too long ago, and it's 50-something years old. They're old. They get the job done, but we need better and bigger. What's your plans when you get in? What's your thoughts about having a fair system in terms of being able to get contracts for the new tankers that hopefully we'll have in the near future?
Thank you, Senator. The bed down of new weapon systems falls within, if confirmed, my bailiwick. And I would take a look at the process for strategic basing, assignment of where weapon systems are placed, and ensure that it's a fair and transparent and open process. So as a former Air Force pilot, I understand the value of tankers. I've received gas from KC-135s, KC-10s, and I know that KC-46 is going to be a fantastic weapon system. If confirmed, I will make sure that process stays open, transparent, and move forward with the committee and work closely with the committee to address any issues for a given constituency.
So you would agree that our tankers are getting a little old, the ones that you've been fueled with?
Senator, they are getting a little old, and it's really important that fleet remains viable and effective because, you know, I'm going to say it, and you can't kick ass without tanker gas, and that's exactly the way I believe we should proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Senator Kane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations to the panel of qualified nominees. To Mr. Parker and Dr. Schaefer, just an issue that I just kind of want to put on your radar screen, not really to ask about, but in your manpower responsibilities. Should you be confirmed, we're doing a lot of analysis now of the 20-year global war on terror, how the battle was fought, lessons learned, what we need to do differently going forward. One of the aspects of this 20-year war that I think makes it pretty unique, and there are other aspects as well, is how much of the burden was borne by contractors. 7,000 to 8,000 deaths of U.S. troops in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria, but there were more contractor deaths, 8,000 to 9,000. And there were many times during the active phases of war in Iraq and Afghanistan where the number of U.S. contractors in those countries outnumbered the number of U.S. troops. We've spent a lot of time on the committee during the time I've been here talking about, the segue from a draft to an all-voluntary military and what a transition that was. But I don't think we've spent much time talking about the transition from having troops fight wars to having contractors fight wars. And I'm a little bit worried that the 8,000 to 9,000 U.S. contractors who died are sort of like the invisible casualties of the war. We had a hearing recently where appropriately, witnesses talked about the 7,100 troops who died during these wars, but didn't reference the U.S. contractors who did, or the 20 DOD civilians who did. So I hope as you're analyzing manpower requirements going forward, and as you're involved in assessment of the manpower used during the 20-year global war on terror, that we put a critical eye on this issue of how much of the burden we now put on the shoulders of contractors. I'm pretty sure there's never been a war in the history of the United States where the contractor deaths exceeded the troop deaths. And we ought not just to kind of accept that without analysis going forward. Dr. Chaudhary, I want to ask you a couple of questions. One of the largest providers of military housing, Balfour Beatty, recently paid a $65 million fine, agreed to pay that after pleading guilty to fraud in connection with the military housing program. Them being held accountable, that's a good thing, but there are still countless homes on our bases around the country and all the service branches that are not up to snuff. And if Mr. Parker and Dr. Schaefer do all they can to recruit folks in, but military families or folks thinking about joining the military think that the quality of housing is substandard, as somebody who served in the military and lived on these bases, you know how difficult that will be in terms of us meeting our recruiting needs. So I would just like to hear you talk about the priority that you would place within your responsibilities in the Air Force, should you be confirmed, on just making sure that we are continuing to be up to speed on work orders and doing what we need to do. And your willingness to come back and ask this committee for more assistance if there are additional authorities you need to make sure that the quality of housing is what our Air Force members are entitled to.
Thank you, Senator. As a former military member, I think about military privatized housing a lot, especially having a special needs child and having their special needs addressed on issues like allergies or anything under the sun that requires support is really, really important to me because I've lived that experience. Our military members and their families deserve to have well-maintained, clean, and excellent housing. Not only that, a system in which their grievances can be addressed, as well as any challenges that they're meeting at the same time. If confirmed, you have my commitment that I will move out on this issue extremely quickly to ensure that we have the right oversight, management, contracts, across the board. I'm going to take a top-down look at every aspect of our military privatized housing because we just absolutely have to get this right. Our military members deserve that.
I'll just say I was very, very unhappy with the performance of some of the private military housing providers, but I was more unhappy with the absence of oversight and just, contract supervision by the Pentagon. Nobody signed up to be a Beatty Balfour tenant. They signed up to be a soldier, sailor, airman, or woman, or Marine, and the responsibility for their housing was fundamentally a DoD responsibility. And once the private contracts were entered into, there just was a long period of time where the DoD exercised very little oversight and supervision over these contracts. So we will take you at your word on that and look forward to more discussion should you be confirmed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Blackburn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to each of you on your nomination. Mr. Parker, I want to come to you first and talk a little bit about esports, and I'm going to ask you to give me your response in writing rather than taking the time today. I represent Tennessee, and of course, we have the Navy Recruiting Command. They're in Millington, Tennessee. Very pleased to have it in Tennessee. And it's done its own esports team, Goats and Glory. So what I'd like to hear from you is how you think this helps with potential recruits, how this could be built out. And Ms. Schaefer, I want to come to you, and I'll give you this one for a written response to the Army's talent management strategy, which is going to be important for 21st century warfare. And having the young people who are going to have the skill sets to utilize technology is going to be important. So I'd like to hear from you how you see this helping with recruitment and retention for the Army, making the Army a more desirable employer, and then how you can utilize that with the National Guard. And as I have visited deployed troops and talked with some of the commanders, we've talked about the need to recruit the skill sets that someone is using in their day job that can be applicable. And as you're well aware, we have the Guard's Intel unit housed in Nashville. So I'd like that one from you in writing, if I may. And Mr. Chaudhary, am I saying that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
All right. I know that Senator Inhofe talked with you about the July 21 op-ed. And what I'd like from you, a yes or no, would you use machine learning and AI to monitor military personnel's electronic footprint?
Senator, no.
You will not, okay. And we know that AI has been assessed, and this is the ACLU, to deepen racial and economic inequities. And multiple independent studies have uncovered both gender and racial bias in AI systems that are sold by Microsoft and Amazon and IBM and others. So how do you square looking for racism with a tool that is accused of racial bias?
Thank you, Senator. And the article that you referenced, the intent of that was to enter the public discussion on the issue of extremism. And it fell short, and I regret that.
Okay, I'm just asking how you square.
Yeah, allow me to be clear on the issue. The
Okay.
constitutional rights of our military members should be protected at all times, and I believe that.
So you are committing that you're going to protect their civil liberties?
Senator, you have my commitment that I will protect military members, their civil liberties under the Constitution.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about DEI and DEI training. What we have seen, there's been so much talk this week about the 6 million man-hours that have been used on DEI instead of training our men and women to do the job that they are recruited and that they are prepared to do, defending this country. So why don't you talk a little bit about, for the record, how you see DEI being central to military readiness?
Thank you, Senator. Diversity and inclusion is important to our readiness because it ensures we have a force that brings in all points of views and is representative of our nation. If confirmed, I will make sure that I follow DoD guidance on diversity and inclusion and ensure that I execute programs as
Okay.
appropriate from DoD
Do you
guidance.
prioritize DEI over military readiness and the ability to combat malign actors such as Iran, Russia, and China?
Senator, diversity and inclusion is important to readiness, and readiness is absolutely crucial to addressing the threats our nation faces. If confirmed, I'll make sure that our national security interests are addressed from that angle, not prioritizing one or the other, but understanding that it's a integrative process. But the readiness of our force is absolutely critical, and you have my commitment that I will prioritize that in our national security interests.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think we all want the best for our men and women in uniform. Thank you all
Yes,
for
ma'am.
being here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.